Inspirational Creatives, episode 289. Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. Rob here, and welcome to another episode of Inspirational Creatives. In today's episode, we're going to change gear a bit and talk about something a little different. Normally, I like to infuse creativity, leadership and entrepreneurship into these conversations, but today I want to talk about mental health and education. For me, I feel these are areas in life of great importance and something we don't really cover enough in this series, particularly at a time where in 2020, where there's been a huge emphasis on homeschooling and the responsibilities that parents have looking after their children's mental well-being and education. So my guests today are a couple who met as teachers and fell in love a few years later over a motorbike, more to be revealed. Together they help parents navigate the murky waters of higher education, giving parents an advantage to their kids at GCSE level. Believe it or not, our kids spend half of their time at home, and it seems that this is where a lot of our kids' learning goes on. And this is where Paul and Emily, my guests today, give parents support. With a master's from Cambridge University and as a head of maths and a lead practitioner for 15 years or so, Emily recently published the GCSE Survival Guide for Parents. I also have with me today Paul, who spent most of his teaching career as head of computing, business studies, childcare and development and health and social care, and unbelievably teaching those subjects remarkably all at once. Together they have a website which supports parents called the Parents Guide to GCSE.com, which I've learned so far is all about helping your kids with their GCSEs without nagging. And whilst my own kids are still quite young, I'm particularly pleased to be speaking to Emily and Paul today on behalf of my sisters as parents of my nephews Tom and Harry, who unbelievably will soon be at GCSE age. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Paul and Emily. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Great to have you on the show today. Before we begin, that's probably my longest introduction yet, and I'm known for my relatively lengthy introductions. Is there anything you would add to that introduction to give our listener a sense of who you are?
I am approximately 1 to 2 cats away from being a crazy cat lady. Paul knows pretty much every piece of football trivia that ever has happened in a pub quiz ever.
And I'm 1 to 2 golf shots away from actually just giving up completely and realising I'm not very good.
That's
pretty much us in a nutshell.
That's brilliant. So you're both parents.
I have got twin boys who are 18, just gone off to university. So Emily is stepmum, but we have our own daughter who is very shortly turning 12, which is horrifying both of us.
Yep.
But yes, so there's 3, but obviously 2 have recently flown the nest.
Yes, it's oddly quiet.
A lot of parents are perhaps sharing some of that experience with having had the kids at home for so long this year and then them going back to school, and all of a sudden, certainly parents that I know that are working from home are finding it now oddly quiet. So tell us the story about how you both met and the motorbike. I'm intrigued.
Well, I can go with this one. So we started on the same day at the same school as our first teaching practice in Peterborough. And at the time we were married to other people and not in the same department. And because I was slightly under the thumb, shall we say, I didn't really get to do many of the social events that the new trainee teachers did. So we kind of crossed paths occasionally, but it certainly wasn't there wasn't a social element to it. And fast forward 3 or 4 years with divorces and the like, we just got talking in one of my computing rooms. But Emily came in wearing motorcycle leathers, having just purchased a motorbike, and
that was that.
That was that. I don't suppose I can go into too much more detail, but she looked great, and it sparked a conversation. And 1 child later, and 12 years later, it's all good.
So There's a serious side to your story. Emily, I understand you left your teaching career after suffering from depression. What's the backstory there, and how did that lead towards creating the Parents' Guide to GCSEs?
So I was, I'd just got my first job as head of department, and I'd done a year or so in the role, and I was loving it, and everything was going really well. We were making some really positive changes in quite a difficult school, and then there was a change of management, and my line manager, who had previously been sort of fab, really supportive, also an ex-head of maths, so she got me and trusted me and talked me through lots of things, and I felt like I was part of the team. She left, and I got a new line manager who was not so supportive, and one thing led to another, and it was just one of those not really pleasant work environments for a while. And it got to the point where I was kind of driving to school in tears, and it wasn't fun, let's say. So any teacher will tell you, in the holidays, not so much half terms, but when you get a couple of weeks off, or the summer holidays, a few days before you go back, you start to have the going back to school nightmares. And they usually involve, I don't know, you're put in charge of a class teaching a subject that you've never taught before, or you're in charge of a field trip and nobody told you about it and half the kids have gone missing, or something crazy along those lines. And those back to school nightmares this Christmas holiday just had started at the beginning of the holidays. And I was talking to Paul about it, and he said, look, if it's making you feel like this, I feel like you probably just need to have a bit of a break.
Yeah. It wasn't quite as simple as that. The holidays, the Christmas holiday as well. And Emily was getting emails from her line manager saying, on the first day back, I need X, Y, and Z on my desk. By the way, what about this, this, and this? And all sorts of work-related questions on, 27th of December. And it was, I could just see the blood drain from Emily's face when she's reading these. And she showed me, it's like, you can't do that because it is the holidays. It isn't work time. It's not something that needs to be tackled now. It can wait until the first day back. But I think it was very carefully planted at that time just to pressurise her and to, frankly, make her feel miserable, and it succeeded. So it was quite a quick conversation. And I said, she was dreading going back, and I said, well, don't. So
went and saw the doctor to get myself signed off just for a week, just to say, look, I just need a bit of a break just to get my head straight, and it'll be fine. And then I think my brain sort of basically went, oh, good, we can stop just barely coping, and broke. And I was, pretty much useless for a couple of months. Just couldn't get off the sofa, couldn't do anything, couldn't feel anything, I kind of, the best description I've heard for what depression feels like is like the old Eels song, Novocaine for the soul. You're just numb, can't feel anything. You'd be part of a conversation and you'd know that it's supposed to make you feel quite happy because you're talking about something fun, and you fake it because you should, but you don't feel it. And I was pretty much useless, and you did a cracking job of surviving that, because it can't have been much fun for you.
And whilst she was obviously still at work, or employed, and on the email system, a friendly face in the building sent Emily some messages which had been sort of, unfortunately forwarded to the wrong people, which were basically saying, let's just make Emily's life slightly miserable. And it was bizarre to read. It was genuinely, why would you do that as an employer, as a line manager? Why would you want to make a point of going down that route? Because
luckily it wasn't really representative of the school. It was just this person. It's a lovely school. But when I'd started to get better, and antidepressants were the trigger for that. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain, and I tried my best to think my way out of it, and it didn't work. And I tried all the go for walks and all the stuff you're supposed to do. Didn't make any difference. So antidepressants were the way forward. I got off them as quickly as I could because they didn't make me feel great, but they did make me feel again. And I was starting to get better, starting to think, I kind of really should be going back to work now, because I could do that, but I can't cope with going back into that environment. So I left that job and I'd applied for a couple of other bits and bobs, did a temporary spot back at the old school for half term just to be doing something useful. Started a new job in the September, which I was really excited about. And unfortunately, I again, was cursed with a not so great boss. And this is the point where people listening are probably thinking, oh, well, she sounds like she might be difficult to work with. And there's 2 bad bosses in a row. You know, there's no smoke without fire. But this was a well-documented, not so fab, you know, lots of high turnover in the department kind of a boss. Nothing I did was good enough. And I started to feel those wobbles again, because I could feel it happening. It was kind of anxiety that began, and, you know, your chest tightens and you're starting to have those thoughts about how you can't be good enough at anything. And I thought, this is not where I want to be. This isn't fair on my family. This isn't fair on me. It's not fair on my students, my colleagues. I can't do this. So I left without a job to go to. I decided my sanity was more important than my salary. And that second not so great boss was the beginning of the end for my teaching career. I'd just fallen out of love with it and decided I needed to try and do something different. So my parents, being fabulously supportive, found an article about someone in the paper who'd set up their own business using Fulfilled by Amazon. She did supplements or something, and said, you could do this. You could do this for something as a, you know, outside of school job to try and start replacing your income. And so I'd created lots of posters for my classroom, which people always said, oh, that's fab, can I have one? So I started selling posters for classrooms on Amazon, and that was a nice little bit of pocket money, but it wasn't ever going to be a replacement income. And then we came up with various ideas for different things we could do. We set up a website for form tutors. So when you're a secondary teacher, you usually have a form group, and they come in the morning, you have 20 minutes, you have to do the register, and you have to have the conversations about their uniform and figure out what all the various crises are. And you're also supposed to teach them some literacy and some numeracy and some life skills and that kind of stuff. And it's really hard to do. So we set up a website with just useful resources for teachers, for form tutors. So it's literally open the website, click on one of the tabs, and they've got stuff to do on the board while you go and deal with the crisis that's just walked into the room. And that, again, was fine. It's still tickling along and helping out form tutors, but it wasn't going to be the replacement for the income. And it took a random message on a Facebook group to have our little epiphany. So we're part of, our daughter was in year 5 at the time, and there was a Facebook group for the mums, mostly, a couple of dads, I think. And one of the mums had jumped on and said, can anyone help with this maths homework? I just don't get it. It's bar modelling, which is a whole new thing that we've stolen from Singapore, I think. That's a way of doing sums that isn't something that parents recognise at all. And if it's not been explained well enough to the kids, or they just didn't understand it, then you can't help because they can't explain it to you. And I had this light bulb moment. Who's helping the parents? There's a massive millions of pound industry supporting students, you know, revision guides and tutors and all sorts. But as a parent, you just want to help. That's what you want to do. You hate to watch your child struggle through stuff. You want to be able to help. But how do you help? I mean, we know GCSEs and A-levels. That's what we know. And as teachers, we got that. But at the same sort of time, our boys were going through their GCSEs. And it's a very different thing when it's you're on the other side, when you're the parent rather than the teacher, because it's not all about your subject. And they're your kids. So let's face it, they don't want to listen to you because you're their parents. So you can't possibly be right. Whatever it is, the sky can't be blue, the grass can't be green because you said so. And so we thought there must be something. We must just have missed it. So we did lots of searching, and there are people who do help parents a bit, but mostly they help students. There was no one who was just saying, look, parents, if you want to understand what's going on so that you can help them, then we can help you do that. Because as we say, knowledge beats nagging every time. And that's how the Parent Guide to GCSE was born.
Wow, what a fascinating light bulb moment. So what was your perspective at this time, Paul, in terms of what are your memories and your recollections from what happened?
Well, my take on it was, obviously I've seen Emily going through the struggles, and I mean, she talks about the no smoke without fire, but in teaching, far too often, in my experience, there are people who get in positions of power who just, I don't know, they don't do that when they're normal teachers at the lower, at the start of their career. It's just when they progress, they for some reason want to, I don't know, wield the power and make sure everyone knows how. Anyway, so it's long story short, we kind of started talking to each other about if we carry on doing this, teaching, we will be, the way that teachers are and their pensions work, we'll be working till we're 67. And it's not much to look forward to, because we struggle to do the job in our 40s. Sorry, me in my 40s, Emily in her 30s before I get a slap. So imagine doing it when you're 60, 65, 66, 67. It just, it wasn't going to be something that would work. So we kind of had a quick session. If we carry on doing it, this is what we're doing forever. What can we do? And that's kind of, where the epiphany came from. And it was just a case of easing Emily out of teaching. She went from full-time to part-time. And it was those kind of really easy conversations about, can I go part-time? Not that she was asking permission, but we discussed it, and the answer was yeah. And then, shall I give up altogether and focus on this? Yeah. It was such an easy thing to transition to. I carried on working because obviously when you're starting a business, cash flow is going to be an issue. So I was the kind of sensible adult in the room who just got the boring salary paid in every month just to make sure we could make ends meet. And the plan was always to, I don't know if the word is get me out. I think it was. It was
rescue
get me out.
You,
rescue,
I think is
the word. So I've been out for probably about a year now. I stopped last September, but then I carried on doing a few days just to help out some sixth form classes because they couldn't get a replacement teacher. But I'm now, I think, almost certainly, definitely. We are definitely done with our kind of classroom careers. But we've got so much work to do with Parent Guides to GCSE and Parent Guides Post 16 that we have to be full time on this, otherwise we can't get the work done. So
yeah, it's incredibly full time, isn't it? Running your own business.
It is. There's been so much to pick up, because obviously as teachers, the most we've ever had to sell is algebra to teenagers. That's really it, and it's been quite a big jump. So I've always been a bit of a nerd, a lot of a nerd, and I like to dabble in making websites and things in my spare time. So that kind of side of things wasn't so bad. Not had any trouble with the tech side of things, but the marketing and the sales has been a whole new world for me. So I have basically read pretty much every business book on the planet at this point, and just absorbed all the knowledge and taken far too many courses, spent a lot of money on my education to make sure that I can do this right, and that I'm creating the best possible customer experience. Because with a membership, what you want is your members to be so deliriously happy with you that they stay for as long as humanly possible, which for us at the moment is from year 10 through to year 13. And then they refer you to all of their friends because you did an amazing job. So that is kind of the ideal marketing plan, is to make our members super, super happy, which I think we're doing a pretty good job of according to the various messages we've been getting. So yeah, it's taken a while to get there though. There's been a big confidence issue, because I don't feel confident selling, and I've had to make a bit of a mental leap from, I'm not trying to sell people stuff, I'm trying to help people. And when I'm describing what we do, it's so that I can help more people. It's not so that I can sell things and make lots of money, because that's not what it's about. So long as we can afford to live in our house and feed our children, we're all good. We're very much all about how can we help people. So it's the exact right thing for us to be doing, and we both absolutely love it. So it was the best decision, I think.
Well, yeah, if we go back, 4 years when we were both still full time, we were ships in the night. We would be home from school, obviously with 3 kids on site at the time, and
giant piles of marking.
Somebody's got to do the cooking. You do the cooking, and then you're straight into marking preparation, a bit more marking. It's not it wasn't something that was working for our family, and we had to do something about it, because now the boys have left. I mean, you have to make the most of that precious time. It makes you realise that they don't stay forever, which in some respects is good, but at the same time,
the food bill has gone down by a lot. And it's a shame, because we can't really see lots of them at the moment. With lots of FaceTime, but one's in a lockdown area, so there's no chance of doing any visiting anytime soon.
And one's isolated because he's been in contact with somebody who's tested positive. So they're both they're left home, and they're both basically stuck in a room. Is what.
Bless them. It's like they've been grounded from far away.
Yeah, I'm getting a sense of that. Actually, I was chatting with my own wife just this morning, and Wednesday this week, it was a very rainy day, and our young son, we concluded, would have spent his whole day in the classroom because they didn't do PE outside. They're not doing PE in the school hall at the moment. They're having lunches in the classroom, and we kind of figured actually he'd have spent his whole day in the same room. Curiously, though, I want to ask this just based on something you mentioned a moment ago. You were saying about, your kids don't listen to you. And I think as parents, we all know how true that is. The work that you do and the guides that you provide and supporting parents in the way that you do, is there an opportunity here for parents, I'm curious to know, for them actually to bond with their children, spend a bit more time with their children? Because you were just saying there about how quickly it goes. Certainly the conversations I've been having with parents is, on the one hand, it's great because they're getting more time with their kids because of what's happened this year. And there's an appreciation for that. Actually, we want to kind of adjust our lifestyles in a way so that we can actually spend more time with our kids. But on the other hand, there's the element of like, well, I think a lot of parents just don't know where to start in terms of supporting their children with their education.
Totally.
I'm guessing that with the support that you offer, there's an opportunity here for parents to be able to bond in a way with their children that they've not been able to experience before. Is that what you see with your members?
Definitely, yeah. We encourage people, because what our members have told us works best is they sit down with their child each week and read the email. So we basically provide bite-sized chunks of information throughout the year in a weekly email format. And you can either read it as an email or I record it as a video so you can watch the short video instead, maybe 5 minutes long. So if you sit with your child and kind of take that information in together, then you're working on it as a team. Whereas if you're trying to nag your child into doing some work, it tends to become a battle because you're on opposite sides, because you don't feel like you're working together on something. Whereas when the information's coming from somebody else, it makes it a lot easier for you to be part of the same team, which makes a huge, huge difference, because it's not mum and dad thinking they know everything. It's, no, actually, mum and dad care enough that they want me to get through this year working smarter rather than harder, with less stress and with less nagging, because the parents don't like nagging. I don't like being nagged. That's a much more palatable situation for a teenager, and it gives you that opportunity to have those conversations about school without their automatic barriers going up. We call it our B2 stealth system. So much like the B2 stealth plane, it delivers small but important packages to exactly the right place and exactly the right time without anyone seeing it coming and being able to block it. So it's very much about helping you build that relationship so that you don't spend the whole of year 11, certainly, nagging your children and having that clash all the time. Have you done enough revision? Have you done this? Have you done that? Because when you know what they should be doing, when you know the amount of revision they should be doing, the kind of things they should be doing that make a difference, then you also know when they've done that. And you're not just thinking, well, it doesn't look like they've done a lot today, whereas they could have done half an hour really focused, targeted, amazing revision. And that's just as effective as 2 hours of reading their notes and rubbish revision and
stuff. Yeah.
And so if you know the difference between those things, it means you're both on the same side, you're both working towards the same goals, and much less nagging, which is it makes the house such a happier place to be.
And we get lots of comments from parents how the child's having, as every teenager does, is having a wobble about some aspect of school. And we jump on Zoom calls, quite happy to do that, arrange it straight after school or whenever it suits them, basically, and just talk to both parent and teenager. And it gives them an opportunity for us to discuss whatever the issue is, both of them. But because it's coming from us, it's not coming from the parent. And I think that makes it way more palatable for a lot of teenagers to know it's coming from experts rather than a parent who's just sitting there nagging and trying to sort of get their point across. So that seems to, feedback that works really well as well.
So our listener listening to this might be a parent who's very intrigued now how there's a different approach here altogether in terms of preparing your kids for GCSE. To give them further insight, can you give an example of the sort of information that you share on a weekly basis then? Is this subject-specific information or is this general guidance?
Well, we have a programme that sort of, we've designed it the whole way through the year, and it takes we follow a success path in many respects. it's about preparing students first of all. And bear in mind, we start pretty much in year 10 and can take at the moment all the way through to year 12. We'll be doing year 13 next year. We deliver the information, as Emily said, in terms of when we think they need it. So, for example, with year 11 at the moment, mocks are pretty much upon them. So it's all about that key last minute revision, making sure that the revision they're doing just before the mocks is as effective as it can be. Give them some strategies to make sure that they are making the most of the time that they're sitting at their desk, essentially.
Yeah, and taking the stress out of the mocks as well, because there's been a lot of uncertainty, not mentioning any names, Gavin Williamson, and it's been quite difficult for kids because they haven't known what it is that they're going to be judged on, whether they're going to have exams or not. We've now been told there are going to be exams, but there are still doubts because we've had so many U-turns. There was the last minute announcement before the exams should have happened last year, where he suddenly announced that mocks might be taken into account, and every teacher in the world groaned at the same time because mocks are so varied across schools, therefore completely unreliable, that it wasn't ever going to be a valid thing. But because it's been suggested that mocks might be part of teacher assessed grades, centre assessed grades this year, that has put a lot of pressure on students. And so they're now worrying, what happens if everything gets worse and they have to shut schools again? Am I going to be judged on these mocks when I've got, 2-3 weeks to catch up on 6 months out of school? And panic. And then because they're so stressed and so worried about it, they're just not taking stuff in. So we always say mocks are very much like a dress rehearsal. The point of a dress rehearsal is to find all the bits that aren't quite working, find all the glitches, so you can fix them before the big performance. And mocks are the same thing. You figure out what you don't know yet, you figure out which bits of exam technique you need to work on, and so on and so forth. And if you can reframe them mentally like that, it makes a big difference in terms of stress levels. So that's something we're talking about a lot at the moment, as well as how to help your child get a bit of me time, get a bit of a sanity break over half term if they get the chance, and keeping everybody on track and keeping everybody's well-being in mind, because the stress levels are crazy with students at the moment. So every little bit helps with parents lending a hand.
Another thing that we do is every couple of weeks we do an Ask Me Anything session where parents can join us online, and any questions they have, they can either pre-submit them or they can just ask live, and we just give them all the information that we know, and we do a lot of research about what's going on, particularly with exams, etc. And that's been really, really successful. And the feedback is because if you think about parents' evenings for any subject, and most parents will obviously have been through these, but you don't get a lot of time. It's 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And how do you understand how your child needs to sort of, what does good revision look like? How can they focus? How can they revise better? How can they prepare long answer questions? Those sorts of questions, as a teacher, you can't put that information across in the 5 minutes, because you can probably discuss the results, where they are in the class, and that's pretty much it. And then, there's a queue behind you, you've got to go. I know that parents can follow it up afterwards via email, but we do get a lot of questions about, I think, filling in the blanks that parents don't get the information during parents' evenings.
Yeah, schools are under a lot of pressure and have had budgets cut consistently over years and years and years. And so the ability to spend that time reaching out to parents as an additional thing is just something that is beyond their scope a lot of the time, because they just don't have the budget or the time to do it. So it's a gap that we've been able to fill. And we do talk subject-specific stuff as well. So we kind of go preparation, mindset and things along those lines. Then we go into organisation. So have they got a great revision plan that's going to keep them on track and stop them from getting overwhelmed? Because there's a lot to cover. And if you map it all out, then so long as you've done those bits each day, you're on track, and you don't have to get into the whole headspace of, I still have all of this to do, which really helps, organising their notes so they can find everything when they're going back to do their revision. And it's not just in a giant pile on the table, on the floor. Sorry, we're talking about teenagers. And then, then we go into, subject specific stuff, how, where to find resources, things to know about writing essay questions, non-examined assessment, which is coursework those of us who aren't teenagers anymore, and then into crunch time, how to actually survive the exam period and stay vaguely sane. So it's all, as Paul said, throughout the year at the appropriate times. So you're not just being overwhelmed with a ton of information. It's what you need when you need it.
With the NEA side of things, the coursework, parents just don't generally, unless they ask very specific questions, they don't know about it and how it works and when it needs to be handed in, and the kind of the pressure that is on their teenager to make sure that's done and handed in. And it's not handed in around exam time. It's usually way before. So we kind of help with that, just to make sure that parents understand deadlines, what's required. And even if the deadline, for example, is the 1st of May, it makes no sense to hand it in on the 1st of May. Hand it in on the 1st of April. And teachers are allowed to look over it and sort of give students nudges in the right direction. They're not allowed to mark it, but they can give verbal feedback about areas that are weak. And parents just probably wouldn't know this. So the ability to sort of pass that information on is really important.
It's basically a chance to steal our 15, 16, 30 odd years of experience between us of teaching and our experience of parenting and use that for your own benefit. So according to what we're hearing from our members, it's making a massive difference, particularly to everyone's stress levels at the moment, because it's just nice to know that you know stuff. And then if you don't know something, you can ask, and there is someone to ask. Because when you've got small children, there's a bajillion Facebook groups on how to breastfeed and how to deal with toddlers, and there's nothing when you get to teenagers. And teenagers at their own stage are also a tiny bit difficult sometimes. There are different challenges, and somewhere to vent about that and ask those questions, that community makes a really big difference. I like to think we're helping lots of people.
It sounds like you are, and this is fascinating. And you mentioned community there, and I realised that particularly again in a year of essentially self-isolation for many, that connectivity, that network, those experts like you that people can approach, and is more important than ever, I would say.
We've got a very active Facebook community, and with our members, where a member may ask us a question or pose an issue to do with whatever, even if we haven't seen the message because we're busy for whatever reason, other parents will jump in and say, yeah, this happened to me, this happened to sort of my child's school, and there's that kind of, you're not in this alone, we're all going through this. And it's just so nice to see those conversations happening where everyone is just jumping in to help one another, shared experiences, making sure that parents realise they aren't on their own through this. We're basically all in it together, helping them through to the exams at the end of the year. Yeah,
because we have Facebook pages and groups for both GCSE and post-16 parents. And it's something, so over the kind of from March, when they suddenly announced schools were closed and exams were cancelled, and that was that, and everybody panicked. Through all of the random exam announcements and the whole centre assessed grades versus algorithm nonsense, all that parents were getting were these kind of vague government announcements, or something would ping up on some news outlet, and it was always kind of spun according to which news outlet it was, and you didn't really know what to believe. Something would come out and you'd get one headline that would make it out to be amazing, and the other headline would make it out to be the worst thing that's ever happened, and it was about the same piece of news. And so I basically became the newscaster for parents. So every time a vague government announcement happened, I'd jump on and do a Facebook Live on the page, just explaining to parents, what does this actually mean for you, for your children, from a teacher and parent perspective? And those went crazy. There were people saying, I'm not even watching the news anymore. I'm just waiting for you to explain it to us, because that way I know what I'm getting. And I think one of them went out to over 80,000 views. It was bonkers. And
parents are perfectly capable of reading the announcements themselves, but they just wouldn't make any sense because it's very teacher talky. And so Emily was, very popular. And then that kind of led soon after to an appearance on Good Morning Britain, which was on GCSE results morning, which was nice.
Yes, I'm basically famous apparently now. I don't think I'm ever going to top this.
Yeah,
that's your 15 minutes.
Impossible to live with.
Yeah. That is my 15 minutes. Pretty much spot on, actually.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I hear what you're saying there. I mean, it's one thing to hear an announcement, isn't it? It's one thing to actually understand what it means and what does this mean to us. It's fascinating here about how you are filling that gap for parents and children. And I think one of the things that inspired me on your website, could you just remind our listener what your website is so they can be looking at this now as we're talking?
Yeah, so www.parentguidetogcse.com or parentguidetopost16.com, and post16 is 16 rather than the word.
Brilliant.
We're also launching parentguidetoeducation.com, but that's a whole other story.
Mm-hmm. So our listener can be looking at that now as we're chatting away here. And one of the things that really inspired me about your website was that what you're teaching essentially here, what you're supporting parents and children with, is not just getting to GCSEs. I mean, in some sense, you're offering skills for life.
Absolutely, yeah. It seemed really obvious just to blend the two things, because we were going through this with our teenagers as well. And so it's not just about getting them through the exams, because school shouldn't just be about coming out with grades on a piece of paper. They're about coming out as a well-rounded human being who understands stuff like personal finance and things like why payday loans are a really bad plan and how credit cards work and all the stuff that should be on the syllabus but isn't, and you don't have time to fit it in. And if we can kind of take them from year 10, where they're just starting to get to be really more independent learners and starting to take exams and schoolwork and things more seriously, all the way through to when they're leaving post 16 and either going off to uni or an apprenticeship or to work, where they're having to be an actual grown-up who does grown-up things on their own a lot of the time. There's a lot more to that than just getting through and passing the exams. And more recently, we had, when Black Lives Matter was all over social media and lots of people were talking about it, we sat down and tried to have a conversation with our daughter about racism. And it was really, really, really difficult. And it inspired the idea of our podcast, Parent Guide to GCSE podcast, has a little mini series within it, and we've been doing them as Facebook Lives mostly, where we've done difficult but important conversations to have with your teenager. So we've talked about racism with an expert. So this is all interviews with an expert. So it's not us making it up as we go along. It's people who know how to explain this stuff. So racism, what do we do? Domestic violence, pornography. That was an interesting one. Paul had to leave the house. He couldn't be here while I was doing it because he would have giggled. Very definitely.
This is not true, surely.
Gender and sexuality. So there's been all sorts, and those have been really, really well received, because it's the sort of thing nobody tells you how to explain that to your kids, and the sorts of things that they might be thinking about. Because for kids, stuff like gender is looked at very differently than we look at it as adults, because it's a lot more normal for them to talk about gender being more fluid, because that's the kind of the situation they're growing up in. Whereas for us, it was very different as we were growing up. So having those conversations with experts who point out the bits we need to know about has been really, really different, really interesting. Yeah.
I mean, another aspect of what we're doing, because we're going from we take teenagers from year 10 all the way through to next year, year 13. But when you get to the end of year 11, I mean, unless you've actually done it either as a teenager or as a parent, just having gone through it, the step from year 11 to year 12 is huge if you aren't prepared for it. And the feedback we've had, and this is something we kind of designed into the program, is you do become more independent as a learner through the GCSE program we've got, which means that when you do start post 16 year 12, you are far better equipped to make that leap rather than just going in cold and not making it up as you go along, but you're prepared for the huge step that it is.
Because obviously exams were cancelled, so we sort of had to tweak the program slightly. We did things like personal finance. So we did a whole series on all the different aspects of what they might need to know about, credit scores and things along those lines, because that's the sort of thing they want to start building sooner rather than later, thinking about university finance if they're going to go down that route. So we've really enjoyed building in all the different skills, and we're trying to be quite diverse about it. And it's been really interesting talking to some really interesting people about all these different topics. We've loved it.
It's been also slightly depressing because we did on the personal finance side of things, we're looking at our incomes and how much money we've earned and how much we've saved. Not a lot. And and how the mistakes that we've kind of made, I suppose, and just trying to weave that into, be more responsible with your money from an early age. And it's been really interesting to do, and hopefully pass on the benefit of our wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched upon your podcast there, which is seems to make sense to talk about a podcast on a podcast. So how's that podcasting journey been for you in terms of supporting you with what you do?
It's been really useful just to be able to build up our skill set across different subjects. So we've interviewed an English expert talking about how to teach English language and literature, which is something that we'd never really done or experienced. Talking to a languages teacher of 20 odd years about the things that parents need to know about that stuff. And it's helped us build up our areas of knowledge as well.
One of my favourite ones was we got a load of year 12 students who've just been through GCSEs into a room and basically said, along the lines of, you've been there, seen it, done it. What did you do wrong? How could you have improved? If you to have your time again, how would you do things differently? And the kind of pearls of wisdom they came up with was really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. And from the horse's mouth. I mean, there's no parents involved in this. This is teenagers who've been there, seen it, succeeded, but definitely made things a little bit harder for themselves than they could have done.
Yeah, sounds like a great episode to go and have a listen to.
Indeed. I think it's episode 5 is the teenagers. We've really enjoyed being able to reach out and interview people. So we interviewed recently Joe Valente, who was the winner of The Apprentice in, 2015. He's local to us, which was nice, but it was really interesting and a conversation we would never have been able to have were it not for the podcast. Those kind of things have been fab. We've absolutely loved it. Podcast is so much fun. Really glad we started it.
Yeah, the Joseph Valente one was fun because he was at our school when we started in 2004. We couldn't quite track the dates, but he got expelled from the same school around the same time. So to sort of hear about his journey just as we were leaving and just starting there and he was leaving, it was quite fascinating.
Brilliant. That sounds absolutely brilliant. So could you just remind us the name of your podcast so a listener can go and find that if they're interested?
It's a Parent Guide to GCSE podcast.
As simple as that.
We've tried to, do what it does on the tin, that kind of thing.
I'm amazed at how quickly the time is going now, I realise, and I've got some more questions I'd love to ask you. One of the things I'm becoming more and more aware of is the rise of sort of homeschooling and home education. How does what you do bolt into that?
I think it helps parents to understand how to get their children to work more independently. Obviously, this works much more with teenagers than it would with small ones because smaller ones do need that one-to-one attention. Whereas if you're starting to get your child working more independently, which is the best way for them to do it, it's a great life skill to be able to be self-motivated and kind of get everything done that you need to be able to get done. We show you kind of how they should be studying because there's a reason that there's teacher training and we all do at least a year teacher training to learn how people learn. Because it genuinely makes a difference and it's not something you can just jump into. I mean, we were absolutely terrible at homeschooling. Our then 11-year-old was off. She was just finishing year 6. And because of that, she was kind of in educational limbo. There wasn't anything to work towards really, because the end of year 6 by that point tends to be, phew, we've done the SATs, let's chill out a little bit. And so we mostly left her to her own devices. She did things like she learned to touch type. She designed the entirety of our dream home, complete with, mood boards and colour schemes and all sorts. She learned some cartooning and things. She did odds and ends from school, but we mostly let her be quite independent in her choices. And she chose things that she wanted to learn about. And that I don't regret. Because we could have sat down with the whip and said, right, you will do some sums now. But she's pretty great at maths. I think I would have switched her off school if we'd tried to be really, enforced about homeschooling. But that's because we have quite an independent child who loves to learn. If you've got a child who is not so independent and does not feel so positive about school, then I think homeschooling can be quite tough. And understanding how to get kids into routines and how to help them work smarter rather than harder is definitely the way forward if you're trying to homeschool, because it just takes a lot of the stress out again.
Yeah, there's a lot of parents may sit there thinking, well, my child is upstairs working at the desk, or they're at their desk, but far too often they're not really being that productive. So it's about knowing what good work or good revision or presenteeism at your desk doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's about making sure that they're doing the most effective type of work, and I think that's a lot of where our informational help comes in as well. Making sure that if they do have to spend an hour at their desk, make it really focused, make it really useful, working, as Emily says, working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Actually, it's one thing to just be just at your desk, then there's actually being productive.
This comes from experience as well, because when our boys were going through GCSE, one of them was upstairs at his desk, present at his desk. So we're sitting there feeling quite smug. We're teachers, we know how this works. And we only, I don't know how we came across it, but basically he had his Kindle in his top drawer. So every time he walked up the stairs, which are the creakiest stairs in the whole world, he had forewarning. He heard the drawer shut with a Kindle in it. And he wasn't doing any work at all. He was literally just sitting there reading, which is, reading's not bad, but you do need to do the revision to make sure that the GCSEs are going to work out for you. But yeah, so he was absolutely present, but was certainly not being productive.
Yes, which came back to bite him when his brother got better results than he did.
Yes.
As twins, that's a big deal. There was a lot of gloating.
But literally, there's only one grade across all of the subjects, but one grade in it. But it's a win, isn't it?
Yeah, gotcha. So for someone listening to this podcast, very interested in your journey and what you've been through and what you're going through, there might be other teachers listening to this podcast inspired by your story. What would be your one piece of advice, not for parents, I'll ask you that in a minute, but for someone wishing to go off and do their own thing? What would you say your one biggest lesson has been, and what would be the one piece of advice you didn't know before you made that leap that you would give now?
I wish we'd gone for the membership sooner. I wish we'd had that epiphany, because the membership has absolutely been the right thing for us. And you can run a membership on pretty much anything. Like, name your niche, there will be a membership that you can run around that. I mean, we support parents who have 15, 16-year-olds. There are a lot of those, and it kind of replaces itself as an audience every year because there are always going to be more. But if there are people who have memberships based around enjoying crocheting, and they have a membership based around, sharing patterns and things along those lines. It doesn't matter what it is that you know, but if you know something and you love something, there are going to be other people out there who feel the same, and you can share your knowledge with them. You don't have to be an expert, and I've struggled a little bit with this myself, particularly recently, and came up with a bit of an epiphany around that as well. I used to teach karate, and when I taught karate, I wasn't a black belt. I was maybe 6 months into my learning, but I was far enough ahead that I could teach a class of beginners, because by the time they caught me up in terms of my belt, I'd moved on. So you don't have to be this amazing guru and expert in everything. So long as you are a few steps ahead of the people that you're teaching, they are trying to get to your level, and that's what you can help them to do. So there is always a way that you can value your sanity over your salary. And it does take a bit of a jump, and it helped that we had some savings, so we weren't quite so worried about the financial side of things. The membership was definitely the thing that I wish we'd realised sooner, because then we'd be further down the journey and we'd not have spent so much time dabbling in other things, because this is definitely what we want to do.
I mean, in a way, with the Parent Guide to Post-16, when we launched that, which was, I guess, mid-COVID, possibly,
March.
When we launched the site and got our first members on board, it was really in its infancy. We spent a huge amount of time over the summer working on the content, so it's kind of getting to the point of being finished. But obviously we only need to work, probably about a month ahead of ourselves, but we didn't sort of delay it because it wasn't finished. We launched it and just made sure that
we built it with them.
Yeah.
So we had our group of founding members, and they gave us feedback on everything and said, this bit's really amazing. We're not so keen on this thing. Have you thought about this? And we built the content with their feedback as we went along. So we knew it was exactly what they needed because they told us so. We didn't have to guess. We didn't spend ages building something and then wonder if it was going to work. We built it with our members so that it was exactly what was right for them. So yeah, you don't have to spend ages getting everything right before you start. You can build it as you go. And sometimes that's quite nice, because then they feel like they've been able to shape the system, shape what we do, and that's a lovely feeling.
I talked about the ask me anything things that we do on Thursday night, but when parents suggest something or ask a question, or they make a suggestion about what we could add to the site, sometimes we hadn't considered it or thought about it. It's a genius idea, so we can make a note and quickly add content to help either that particular parent or, more likely, our whole cohort of parents. So it's great to get feedback so we can continually improve and make their experience even better.
Yeah,
that's great. And for parents with kids that might be stressing out, uncertain, worried about their GCSEs right now, what would be your best piece of advice for them?
Little and often.
Yeah.
It's probably the top tip that we give. If you can revise little and often and be doing the right kinds of things, so more active than passive revision, and don't just sit and read your notes, because that's not the best way to revise. But if you can do little and often, it all adds up really quickly. Whereas if you leave it until the last minute and then you're panicking and trying to cram everything and revising 8 hours a day, 7 days a week in the run up to exams, it's not efficient. It's not good for anyone. It doesn't help.
We ran a competition over the summer, and one of the winners won essentially a bespoke revision plan for their child, and I created it, but we arranged between us how many hours were going to be dedicated to revision. So it's half an hour all the way through the first term, half an hour a day. Bearing in mind they've still got homework to do, so you can't just stick 4 hours of revision of an evening, because in that September, October, November term there's this huge amount of homework that still comes back. So half an hour, then into the second term goes to an hour an evening, and then into sort of April, May time, as soon as the summer term starts, it was 3 blocks, so an hour and a half. And essentially it was 169 hours of revision, but in just really small chunks. So 169 hours sounds like a huge amount. It really does. And if you said to any child, right, go and do 160 plus hours of revision, they'd be like, what? That's just outrageous. But half an hour a day, going into after Christmas, an hour a day, really, they're into a routine. They just get it done, and it builds, and it saves that massive rush from probably February, March time, where they're getting stressed. They're thinking, I haven't done any revision yet. I'm already behind everybody. It's not a good place to be. And just little and often, as Emily says, is absolutely the key to this.
Thank you for that answer, Paul. That's really, really insightful. And Emily, what's your proudest achievement with Parents Guide to GCSE so far?
Well, I think it's just the feedback we get from the parents, knowing the difference that we have made to them and their teenager or teenagers. It's so nice to get those emails, get those Zoom calls where they feedback and the like. That's probably the thing that I've enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I think my favourite phrase from a feedback email was that I'd been her rock through this whole situation. To have someone feel like they can rely on us that much through all of this madness around exams, that has been a huge deal. That tells us that we're doing the right thing. Yeah.
I mean, we were worried when COVID hit, because we prepare parents and their teenagers for exams. So when COVID hit and it was immediately announced that exams were cancelled, we were a bit concerned, but it turns out our role was just completely different, but at the same time still reassuring parents and the teenagers about what was going to be happening. And that's still the same today, I guess. There's still quite a lot of uncertainty as we're recording this about what's going to happen next summer. And we're still there. We're still helping people and making sure they understand the vague government announcements, which are still coming out.
Yeah, so supporting parents despite the ongoing uncertainty. Which leads me to what's next for you both and the Parents Guide to GCSE.
We are currently busy building the Parent Guide to Education, which is going to be the overarching site between the two. So anything that we offer, you'll be able to go to Parent Guide to Education and get, because we're building lots of mini courses. So things like getting your child to build a revision plan that they're actually going to stick to involves quite a lot of work on their part initially, just to make sure that it's right for them and they're going to stick to it. It doesn't need to be a long and drawn out process. We have a revision plan generator on parentguide2gcse.com that you can use for free if you sign up for a free account as a parent, and it'll generate a plan in less than 10 minutes, probably 5 if you've got all your term dates to hand. But adding the detail of the different topics that you revise as you go along each time and so on, those kind of things make the difference to whether kids are likely to stick with the revision plan or not. So we're building a little mini course around that. Paul's done a mini course around personal statements and how to write a really great personal statement to get into the uni course of your dreams.
So I've been a post-16 tutor for most of my teaching career, so that was my real passion, was helping them through the UCAS process. So it seemed like a natural thing to record, and so that's now done and ready.
Yep. And then I need to record my book on Audible. That's one of my big projects coming up. And then I kind of vaguely semi-committed to writing the post-16 survival guide for parents, which will be the next book. So I probably ought to crack on with that at some point soon.
We're quite busy, it's fair to say.
Yeah.
But we're loving it.
Like
we're no less busy than we were when we were teachers, but we're loving every second of what we do.
We're choosing to do it, which is why we're so busy, because we could sit back and say, this is working, it's fine, let's just keep this ticking over. But we really want to be in a position where we can support every parent in the UK through their child's GCSEs and post-16. And in order to do that, we need to keep pushing forward with different options, different ways that people can opt in for our support. So we're still building.
And just make sure the membership is something that gives them exactly what they need. And I don't think it's ever going to be finished. There's always something that we're improving. So it's exciting to see it. If you think about where it was, 18 months ago to compare to where it is now and the changes we've made, it really is makes us feel very proud.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I'd love to ask you just quickly, what's inspired each of you in the last week? What's one thing that's inspired you in the last week?
That's a good question.
Wow. Okay. In the last week, I'm going to go with this. Ticks so many boxes. Emily has inspired me purely because even though the site looks amazing, she's come across a new kind of widget, essentially a new way of presenting the information on the courses that we're just creating, and it was like watching a child at Christmas when she found this thing. And it kind of just it gamifies it. It just makes it easier to go through the course and make sure you've ticked everything off and you haven't missed out on something. And you get all sorts of pleasing sounds when you coins going into the bank or some sort of magic noise. As soon as she found it, that was it. I didn't see it for a week. It's just I want to get this. This is what our members need. Even though what we had was fabulous, she's just absolutely been on it. And it's that constant desire that she's got to improve and make the membership experience even better is quite cool, frankly.
And on a similar note, finding this new thing, this new gizmo, it's Experiencify.io, and it's new and they're building it still, but it's so awesome. That has inspired me to switch over all the memberships and make it an even better experience for parents. So I'm going to see if I can make it do the happy noise. Hold on. Did you get that?
That's a happy noise.
Is when you tick something off, as you know, I've done the one thing this week, because all of our emails end with the one thing this week. If you do this one thing, it'll make a difference. When you tick that off each week and it makes that noise, it's just a little bit magical. That has made me very happy all week. Yeah, very much like a child at Christmas, just a new toy and something really easy to set up. So that's inspired me to come up with different ideas for courses and all sorts, because it's much easier to structure now. That has been really very cool. I'm going to have a different one though, because I've just thought of a great one. Our daughter, this is how we know we're doing the right thing. Our daughter, who's about to turn 12, has just decided in the last week or 3 that she wants to run a business of her own, and she's setting up a subscription box business for scrunchies, which I think is a genius idea. And she's ready to go. She's mapped it all out. She's got very definitely the entrepreneur bug.
Found the stock.
So that
packed it all into boxes. Told Mum what the website needs to look like.
Oh yeah,
it's quite impressive.
That has been inspiring this week. Just to watch her light up over it, it's been fab.
Fantastic. So finally, could you tell us about where our listener can find out more about you and, of course, all this wonderful work that you're doing?
Okay, so you can find our website at parentguide2gcse.com, or parentguide2post16.com, depending on where your kids are. Or you can find us on Facebook by searching, again, either Parent Guide to GCSE or Parent Guide to Post16. We've got Facebook pages, we've got Facebook groups. If you are in a bit of a pickle over year 10 or 11 and finding it a bit tough, then grabbing the GCSE Survival Guide for Parents from Amazon is probably the way forward. I've distilled my years of experience and knowledge into a very pink book, and so you can't miss it on Amazon. It is violently pink and yellow. That's a really great place to start if you want a bit of an overview, just kind of the higher level view of what you can do that will make a difference for your child.
That's fantastic. Well, Emily and Paul, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I wish you all the best with the Parent Guide to GCSE, and I'll put all of those links into the show notes so our listener can find them nice and easily. And thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us on.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.